Okay. Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm not really good at social situations. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love people, most of them anyway. I just feel adrift without structure. This is one of the reasons that if you know me, you probably know me from Twitter. It's also why I make weird shit. I've got a tabletop game where you have to share your most vulnerable self with a bunch of strangers, and a physics-based dating simulator, and a twine game about surviving suicide. Systems are my armor and my Rosetta Stone. They're how I protect myself and also how I discover who I am. I spend a lot of time advocating the idea that game designers should be a part of the things they make. When I say that, I'm not talking about autobiographical content. That stuff is great, but the story of you isn't you. It's not who you are. You are not the nouns, you're the verbs. The thing is, every single one of us exists within webs and systems of constraint. Some are self-imposed, and some are imposed by societal rules and norms, and the general world around us. Who we really are, deep down, is the reflection of our unique set of constraints. When I advocate making personal games, I'm not just talking to indies working on what have been commonly referred to as empathy games. This is what I want from every single person making any kind of game right now. Make games that scare you. The stuff that's hard to do, the stuff that's personal and frightening, involves taking a hard and critical look at your world, your place in it, your interactions with it, and then finding something to say about those systems, whether you're emulating them, subverting them, whatever makes sense. This is how any piece of art gains perspective, how any form of expression finds its voice. And it's also what makes game design so accessible. Everyone exists under systems. When you abstract those systems to reflect your own experiences, you make games that no one else could make. I can't tell you if any of the games I've made in the last 6 or 7 years are good. That's not up to me to decide. But I can tell you that they certainly are mine. And I'd rather make a mediocre game that was mine than a great game that could have been made by anyone in the world. Like I intimated earlier, I can't understand people or social situations, so I've always sort of made my own social systems in order to pass and be able to operate and succeed in society. It's something I feel like a lot of people do, but it's what specifically led me to games with clear social interactions. I've had my share of weird, significant, terrible happenings in my life, I guess, and I'm not going to get into them here. But if there's one thing I've realized, it's that this is also a typical way that people tend to handle trauma, loss, and grief. You make a system that gives you a way to cope, and then you go through it. In this way, making games based on ourselves doesn't have to simply be a way to share our innermost selves with the world. It can be a form of self-care and self-understanding, allowing us to externalize and process things we feel too deeply to understand on an intellectual level. Games allow us to challenge our own experiences, to do things over, to strengthen or share the parts of ourselves that make us vulnerable. I know it must be rad to use games to experience the sunrise in Southeast Asia through the scope on a sniper rifle, but we can also create wonder where once was pain. My grandfather was a millionaire back when millions meant something. He was president of the Teamsters Union and Chicago Irish through and through until the day that he died. My grandfather was shot on the steps of the Chicago Public Library. They never found who did it, but there's a park named after him in the suburbs. It was a weird time for my mom. She was young and still doesn't know entirely what happened. That photo was the last one of her father she's been able to find. What she does know is this: for a long time, my family had money and safety, and then all of a sudden, they had nothing at all. My mom was shoved off to be raised by nuns at a taciturn boarding school and rarely got to see my grandmother. She was distraught over my grandfather's death and apparently never fully recovered. I don't know. My mom doesn't talk about it much. But there is one thing my mom has often said. Regardless of anything else she may have done, my mom will always respect and admire my grandmother for one reason. After my grandfather died and my family lost everything, my grandmother took my mom to sell his clothes because they were the only things left my family had to sell. And on the way to sell what had to have been the only things she had left of her husband, my grandmother made the whole excursion into a game to keep her daughter happy, to keep her from dwelling at the task at hand. The admiration and love in my mother's voice as she tells this story cannot be described. When I think about what my grandmother did for my mother and probably for herself, I feel a connection to this woman who died long before I was born. In all other ways, I am nothing like her, but I know that I am her granddaughter. I don't have her nose, just her desire to make games that alleviate suffering. I have 2 kids, and someday they're going to want to know who I really am. There's always that point where your kids get a glimpse of your humanity, and sometimes it's because you fuck up, and sometimes it's because you die. Either way, mine are clever, and I know that they're not going to want to take my word for who I am. At least they'll have my games, for good or ill. I hope they want to play them, and I hope they play them with kindness. And I hope they learn the kind of things about me I wouldn't even know how to tell them across years and across miles, long after I am gone. Games are, at their core, connection. Use them to connect to something worthwhile. Thank you.